Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're diving deep
Oh, this will be good.
into The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen.
It's a classic.
It is, this book is a real head scratcher, It explains how big successful companies can trip and fall, even when they seem to be doing everything right.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
It is.
The Innovator's Dilemma argues that listening to your customers,
Right.
investing heavily in R&D,
Uh-huh.
and meticulously planning for the future,
Like all the things you're supposed to do.
all those things we think of as good management
Yeah.
can actually be the seeds of a company's downfall.
Right. It's like the business world version of that Greek myth,
Right.
where the guy is cursed to always be hungry no matter how much he eats.
Oh, yeah. Tantalus.
These companies are constantly striving for more, but their very success can blind them to the real threats. Christensen calls these threats disruptive innovations.
Exactly, and one of the core themes of the book is how these disruptive innovations often start out looking pretty underwhelming.
Okay.
They might be simpler, cheaper, or even less capable than existing solutions in ways that mainstream customers care about. But they have other advantages that appeal to niche markets, and over time they can improve dramatically and completely reshape entire industries.
Okay, so before we get lost in the weeds, can you give us a quick overview
Sure.
of the book's main argument, like the too long didn't read version?
Sure. The Innovator's Dilemma is essentially built on three pillars.
Okay.
First, the concept of disruptive innovation itself. These are innovations that don't necessarily appeal to existing customers at first, but they create new markets
Okay.
and eventually disrupt the established players.
Okay, so far so good. What's the second pillar?
The second is the role of value networks. Think of a value network as the ecosystem a company operates in.
Okay.
Its suppliers, its customers, its competitors.
Got it.
Christensen argues that companies get really good at serving the needs and expectations within their specific value network.
Which makes sense, right? You want to keep your customers happy
Yeah.
and your suppliers on board.
Exactly. But the problem is, this focus on the current value network can make companies blind to opportunities that lie outside of it.
Oh, I see.
They become so good at climbing their current ladder of success that they fail to see the new ladders being built around them.
Okay, that's starting to paint a clearer picture.
Yeah.
So what's the third pillar that holds this whole dilemma together?
The third pillar is the concept of resource allocation.
Okay.
Established companies excel at allocating resources efficiently,
Right.
but they often prioritize projects that promise the highest returns within their existing value network.
So they end up pouring money into making their existing products better and better, even if those improvements don't address the real needs of emerging markets.
Exactly. They fall into what Christensen calls the resource allocation trap, where they miss out on opportunities because they're too focused on maximizing profits in the short term. They're so busy tending to the needs of their best customers, they fail to see the disruptive innovations that might ultimately make their core business obsolete.
Okay, now that we have the scaffolding in place, let's start building this house brick by brick. You mentioned that disruptive innovations often seem underwhelming at first. Can you give us an example from the book that really brings this to life?
One of the most compelling examples is the story of the 5.25-inch disk drive.
Ooh, okay.
Remember, this was back in the early days of personal computers.
Back in the...
The established players in the disk drive market were focused on making bigger, faster, higher capacity drives for mainframe computers.
Because mainframes were the big money makers back then.
Exactly. They were serving the high end of the market, where
Yeah.
performance and reliability were paramount. Then along comes this new 5.25-inch disk drive. It's smaller, cheaper, but also much less powerful than the 8-inch drives that were the industry standard.
So the mainframe folks probably just laughed it off, right? Who needs those tiny, wimpy drives?
That's pretty much what happened. The established companies saw the 5.25-inch drives as a niche product, not something that could threaten their core business.
But here's where it gets interesting for us, right?
Yeah.
Those tiny drives were actually perfect for the emerging market of desktop personal computers. Suddenly, size and price mattered more than raw capacity or speed.
Exactly. The established companies were so focused on their existing value network,
Yeah.
the mainframe market, that they missed the opportunity that was right in front of them. They were blinded by their success.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. They were trying to sell these high-end drives to a market that didn't need them, while a whole new market was emerging that was hungry for something different.
And that's one of the key takeaways here. Disruptive innovations often succeed not by being better in the traditional sense, but by being good enough in a new context. They offer a different set of values that appeal to a different set of customers. And those customers might not even be on the radar of the established players.
So if I'm hearing you right, Christensen is saying that companies need to be careful not to get too caught up in serving their existing customers.
That's right.
They need to be constantly looking out for those emerging markets.
Yeah.
Those new value networks that might be brewing on the horizon.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about abandoning your existing customers, but about recognizing that your future success might depend on your ability to serve customers that you don't even know exist yet.
Okay, so let's say I'm running a company and I'm starting to feel like I might be caught in this innovator's dilemma. What are some of the signs that I should be looking out for? How can I tell if I'm falling into that resource allocation trap?
That's a great question. One of the biggest red flags is if you find yourself consistently dismissing new ideas or technologies because they don't fit your current business model. If you're hearing things like, our customers would never want that, or that's not how we do things here, it might be a sign that you're too focused on your existing value network.
So it's not just about being aware of new technologies. It's about being open to the possibility that those technologies might create entirely new markets that you haven't even considered.
Precisely. Christensen talks about how disruptive innovations often undershoot the needs of mainstream customers at first. They might be less capable or less sophisticated in some ways, but they offer other advantages like simplicity, convenience, or affordability that appeal to a different segment of the market.
And those advantages might not even be obvious to the established players who are so used to thinking in terms of their existing metrics and benchmarks.
That's right. They're so busy climbing the ladder of performance, they don't realize someone is building a whole new ladder next to them.
And speaking of ladders, didn't Christensen use a great analogy in the book about how even the best companies can trip up? Something about a rope ladder?
Oh, yes. He talks about how companies are like climbers ascending a rope ladder. They get really good at climbing the rungs of their current ladder, improving their products, serving their customers, maximizing profits. But then a new ladder appears beside them, and it's made of aluminum. It's lighter, stronger, and offers a better view.
But those companies, they're so focused on climbing their rope ladder, they don't even see the aluminum ladder until it's too late. They've invested so much in their existing technology, their existing processes, their existing way of thinking, that they can't or won't make the switch.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? And it really highlights the challenge that companies face when it comes to disruptive innovation. They need to be willing to let go of the rope ladder, even if it means starting over on a lower rung.
And that takes courage, vision, and maybe a little bit of humility, too.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that your past success doesn't guarantee your future survival. It's about being willing to adapt, to evolve, and to embrace the uncertainty that comes with disruptive change.
This is so fascinating, but I have to admit, it's a little bit scary, too. If even the biggest, most successful companies can be toppled by these disruptive innovations, what hope is there for the rest of us?
Well, that's where the second half of the book comes in. Christensen doesn't just diagnose the problem, he offers solutions. He provides a framework for understanding how disruptive innovation works. And he outlines strategies that companies can use to navigate this dilemma successfully.
Okay, that's a relief. So there is hope. But before we jump into the solutions, I want to explore a few more examples of how this dilemma has played out in the real world.
Well, I'm really intrigued by this idea of value networks. You mentioned that companies can get trapped in their existing value networks. Can you give us another example, maybe from a different industry, that illustrates how this can happen?
Sure. One of the classic examples Christensen uses is the steel industry. Back in the mid-20th century, the big integrated steel mills were the dominant players. They produced massive quantities of high-quality steel for a wide range of applications, from bridges and skyscrapers to automobiles and appliances.
They were like the mainframe computer makers of the steel world.
Exactly. They had huge investments in their plants, their equipment, their workforce. And they were really good at serving the needs of their existing customers, who demanded high volumes of standardized steel products.
Then along came the minimills.
Right, exactly. Minimills started out producing a very specific type of steel. Rebar, the reinforcing rods used in concrete. It was a low-margin product that the big integrated mills didn't even bother with. They were probably thinking, rebar. Who cares about rebar? We're making the steel that builds nations.
That's probably a pretty accurate assessment. But here's the thing. Mini mills were able to produce rebar much more cheaply than the integrated mills. They didn't have the same legacy costs, the same bureaucratic structures.
Gotcha.
They were leaner, more agile, and more focused on a specific market niche.
So they were like the 5.25-inch disc drive makers of the steel world.
Exactly. And over time, they started to move upmarket, producing higher-grade steel products. They gradually began to chip away at the market share of the integrated mills, first in rebar, then in other low-end products.
And the integrated mills, they were so focused on serving their existing customers, they didn't even see the threat until it's too late.
It's a classic example of how a company's success can become its own worst enemy. They were so good at climbing their current ladder of success that they didn't even notice the new ladder being built beside them.
This is making me think about all those other industries that have been disrupted in recent years. Think about what's happened in retail with the rise of online shopping, or the music industry with the shift from physical albums to digital downloads and streaming services, or the taxi industry with the emergence of ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft.
Yes. The innovator's dilemma provides a framework for understanding how these disruptions happen and how they can be managed or even embraced.
Okay, this is all sinking in, but I have to admit, I'm still struggling with this whole idea of disruptive innovation. Isn't innovation always a good thing? How can something be both innovative and disruptive in a negative way?
That's a great question, and it goes to the heart of why this book is so important. Innovation itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's about change, and change can be both creative and destructive.
Okay.
What Christensen is highlighting is that there are different types of innovation, and they have different impacts on different players in the market.
Can you elaborate on that? What are the different types of innovation?
Christensen distinguishes between two main types: sustaining innovations and disruptive innovations. Sustaining innovations are those that improve existing products or services in ways that existing customers value. They make things faster, better, cheaper, or more efficient. They help companies climb the ladder of success within their existing value network.
So those are the kind of innovations that most companies are really good at.
Yes.
The incremental improvements that keep their customers happy and their profits flowing.
Exactly, but then there are disruptive innovations. These are the innovations that create new markets and value networks.
Okay.
They often start out looking underwhelming or even inferior to existing solutions in certain ways, but they have other advantages that appeal to a different set of customers.
Like the 5.25-inch disk drive being smaller and cheaper,
Yes.
even though it had less capacity than the 8-inch drives.
Exactly. Or the mini mills being able to produce rebar more cheaply,
Yeah.
even though they couldn't match the quality or variety of steel produced by the integrated mills.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the difference. Sustaining innovations are about making the good better,
Yeah.
while disruptive innovations are about changing the game entirely.
That's a great way to put it. And what makes disruptive innovations so dangerous is that they often come from outside the established player's field of vision.
Oh.
They emerge in niche markets, or they leverage new technologies that the incumbents don't see as a threat.
And by the time those incumbents realize what's happening, it's often too late to catch up.
Right.
They've invested too much in their existing infrastructure, their existing processes, their existing way of thinking.
It's like that old saying, the only constant is change. Disruptive innovations force companies to confront that reality head on. They challenge the status quo, and they can either lead to a company's downfall or to its reinvention.
So this is why The Innovator's Dilemma is such a crucial read for anyone in business, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just about understanding how to innovate, but about understanding how to navigate the disruptive forces that are constantly shaping the marketplace.
Exactly. It's about being able to recognize the difference between sustaining innovations and disruptive innovations. And it's about developing the strategies and the mindset to embrace change and even to disrupt yourself before someone else does it for you.
Okay, I'm getting fired up. I'm starting to see how this applies not just to companies, but to individuals too. We all need to be aware of the disruptive forces that are shaping our industries, our careers, our lives. We need to be willing to adapt, to learn new skills, to embrace new ways of thinking.
That's a great point, and in fact, that's something we can explore in more detail as we continue our deep dive. Christensen's framework can be applied to a wide range of challenges,
Okay.
from personal development to career choices to societal transformations.
This is getting me really excited to see what else Christensen has in store for us. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Yes, I think this is a good place to pause for now.
Great. We'll pick up where we left off in part 2 of our deep dive. Until then, Keep thinking about those disruptive forces,
Yeah.
those aluminum ladders that might be appearing just outside your field of vision.
Welcome back. We left off talking about how the innovator's dilemma can apply not just to companies, but to individuals, too.
Yes, that's something I've been turning over in my mind. So are you saying we should all be looking for ways to disrupt ourselves in our careers or personal lives before someone else disrupts us?
That's a provocative way to put it. But yes, in a sense, it's about being proactive, about recognizing the signs of potential disruption in your own field and adapting before it's too late.
Okay, so let's say I'm feeling a little complacent in my career. Maybe the industry I'm in is starting to feel a little shaky.
Uh-huh.
What are some concrete steps I can take to disrupt myself before I get disrupted?
Well, first, you need to identify the potential disruptive innovations in your field.
Okay.
What are the emerging trends, the new technologies, the shifting customer needs that might be overlooked or underestimated by the established players?
So I need to put on my disruptive innovation goggles and scan the horizon for those telltale signs of change. But how do I know what to look for?
It's also fast-paced these days.
One way to think about it is to look for solutions that are good enough for a specific need, even if they're not the best solution overall.
Okay.
Remember the example of the Minimills?
Yeah?
They started out producing rebar, which wasn't the highest grade of steel, but it was good enough for a specific application and it was cheaper to produce.
So I should be looking for those niche solutions that are gaining traction, even if they seem kind of underwhelming or unimportant to the big players in my industry?
Exactly. Those niche solutions could be a sign of a new value network emerging. And that new value network might eventually disrupt the existing power structures.
Okay, so I've identified a few potential disruptions. What's next? Do I just jump ship and try to join the revolution?
Not necessarily. Remember, Christensen's book isn't a call to abandon everything you're doing and chase every shiny new object. It's about being strategic, about understanding the dynamics of disruption and making informed decisions.
So what kind of strategies does he suggest? Is there a secret formula for navigating this dilemma?
Well, he offers a range of strategies, and the best approach will depend on the specific situation.
Okay.
But one common thread is the idea of creating separate organizations or units within a company that are dedicated to exploring and exploiting disruptive innovations.
It's like sending out a scout party to explore the new territory, while the main army stays camped in familiar ground.
That's a good analogy. By creating these separate units, companies can give themselves the freedom to experiment, to take risks, and to operate outside the constraints of their existing value network.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're too close to the action, it's hard to see the big picture.
Right?
You need some distance, some perspective.
Exactly. And Christensen offers several examples of companies that successfully navigated disruptive innovations by creating these separate units.
I remember the example of Quantum Corporation.
Yeah.
They were a leading maker of those 8-inch disk drives, but they were slow to embrace the smaller 5.25-inch drives that were disrupting the market.
Yes. They eventually spun off a separate division focused on the new, smaller drives. And that division, free from the constraints and the mindset of the main company, was able to thrive in the new market.
So they essentially disrupted themselves before someone else disrupted them.
Exactly, and that's a key takeaway here. Sometimes the best way to survive a disruptive innovation is to disrupt yourself, to be willing to cannibalize your own products, your own processes, your own way of thinking.
Okay, so creating separate units is one strategy. What are some other approaches that Christensen suggests?
Another approach is to acquire smaller companies
Yeah.
that are already operating in the disruptive space.
Okay.
This can be a faster way to gain a foothold in a new market and to acquire the expertise and the agility that you might lack internally.
It's like buying a ready-made scout party that already knows the terrain.
That's a good way to think about it. And of course, there are risks associated with any acquisition. But if done strategically, acquiring a disruptor can be a powerful way to stay ahead of the curve.
Makes sense. You're essentially buying the future or at least a piece of it.
Right. And another strategy Christensen highlights is the importance of finding the right market for a disruptive innovation.
What do you mean by the right market? Isn't any new market a good market?
Well, not necessarily. Remember, disruptive innovations often underperform in ways that mainstream customers care about.
Oh, right.
They might be simpler,
Yeah.
cheaper, or less capable in certain ways.
So you need to find a market where those limitations aren't deal breakers,
Yeah.
but where the advantages of the disruptive innovation really shine.
Exactly. It's about finding a market where the disruptive innovation's unique value proposition is truly appreciated.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. You need to identify the potential disruptions, create the space to explore them, and then find the right market where those disruptions can flourish. It's a lot to juggle.
It is, and that's why the innovator's dilemma is such a valuable guide. It provides a framework for thinking about these challenges, and it offers practical advice for navigating them.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different strategies for managing disruptive innovation, but I'm wondering, is there one overarching principle that ties all of this together? What's the secret sauce that makes some companies successful in the face of disruption, while others crumble?
I think one of the key takeaways from the innovator's dilemma is that it's not just about being smart or innovative. It's about being adaptable.
Okay.
It's about being willing to change, to challenge your assumptions, and to embrace the uncertainty that comes with disruption.
So it's not about having all the answers. It's about being willing to ask the right questions.
Exactly, and those questions might be uncomfortable, they might challenge the status quo, they might even threaten your existing business model.
But those are the questions that can lead to real breakthroughs, right?
Yeah.
They're the questions that can help you see the aluminum ladder before it's too late.
That's a great way to put it. And one of the most powerful examples of this adaptability that Christensen explores in the book is the story of how electric vehicles could potentially disrupt the auto industry.
Yes, I remember that chapter. It was like he was applying his framework in real time
Yeah.
to a challenge that was still unfolding.
Exactly. And it was a brilliant demonstration of how his principles could be used to anticipate and navigate disruptive change.
Can you remind us how he approached this challenge? What were some of the key insights he offered about electric vehicles?
Well, the first thing he did was to challenge the prevailing assumption that a major technological breakthrough in battery technology was necessary for electric vehicles to become mainstream.
So he wasn't waiting for that magic battery solution to fall from the sky.
No, he was looking at the existing limitations of electric vehicles,
Yeah.
the limited range, the higher cost, the slower refueling times, and trying to find a market where those weaknesses might actually be strengths.
Okay, so instead of trying to make electric vehicles better in ways that gas-powered cars were already good,
Right.
he was looking for a different set of criteria, a different value proposition.
Exactly. He was looking for a market where the unique advantages of electric vehicles, their quietness, their zero emissions, their instant torque, would be more important than their limitations.
So where did he suggest looking? What were some of the potential markets he identified?
He suggested exploring niches where the limited range and performance of electric vehicles wouldn't be major obstacles. For example, he talked about urban delivery services, companies like FedEx or UPS that make lots of short trips within a city.
That's interesting. Their routes are predictable, their distances are relatively short,
Right.
and they're often operating in congested areas where noise and air pollution are concerns.
Right. And he also talked about neighborhood electric vehicles,
Yeah.
small, low-speed vehicles that are designed for running errands or commuting short distances within a community.
It's like he was saying, don't try to force a square peg into a round hole. Find a square hole for that square peg.
Exactly, and that's a powerful lesson for anyone thinking about disruptive innovations. Instead of trying to compete head-on with established products in their existing markets, find a niche where your disruptive innovation's unique attributes, even its limitations, might actually be valued.
Okay, so in the case of electric vehicles, their limited range wouldn't be a problem
Right.
if you're only driving a few miles at a time. And their slower acceleration wouldn't be an issue in an urban environment with lots of stop-and-go traffic.
Exactly. In
Yeah.
fact, in those situations, the quietness and zero emissions of electric vehicles might even be seen as advantages.
This is making me think about all those other emerging technologies out there.
Yeah.
Instead of just focusing on when they'll be good enough to replace existing solutions, we should also be asking, where might they fit right now,
Yeah.
even with their current limitations?
That's a brilliant insight, and it gets to the heart of what the innovator's dilemma is all about. It's a call to challenge our assumptions about what constitutes good or better, and to be open to the possibility that sometimes different can be the real path to disruption.
And that applies not just to companies, but to individuals too, right?
Absolutely.
We can all be disruptors in our own fields by finding those niches where our unique skills and perspectives, even our perceived limitations, might be valuable.
Absolutely. Christensen's framework is a powerful tool for anyone facing disruptive change, whether you're a CEO, an entrepreneur, or just someone trying to navigate a rapidly evolving world.
Okay, this has been incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see the world through a whole new lens. Every industry, every career path, every aspect of life is potentially vulnerable to disruption.
And that can be scary, but it can also be exciting, because disruption means change, and change means opportunity.
So how do we as individuals not only survive but thrive in this age of disruption? What are some practical takeaways from the innovator's dilemma that we can apply to our own lives?
One key takeaway is to be a lifelong learner.
Okay.
The world is changing faster than ever before, and the skills and knowledge that were valuable yesterday might be obsolete tomorrow.
So we need to be constantly updating our mental software.
Right.
Learning new things, expanding our horizons, challenging our assumptions.
And another takeaway is to be adaptable. Be willing to change course, to try new things, to step outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to fail, because failure is often the best teacher.
I love that. It's not about being perfect, it's about being willing to experiment,
Yeah.
iterate, to learn from our mistakes.
And a third takeaway is to be proactive.
Okay.
Don't wait for disruption to happen to you. Seek it out. Look for those emerging trends, those unmet needs, those opportunities to create something new and valuable.
Be the disruptor, not the disrupted.
Exactly. The Innovator's Dilemma is not just a book about business. It's a book about how to thrive in a world of constant change. It's a call to action, an invitation to embrace the uncertainty and to create the future we want to see.
Wow, that's powerful. Okay, so we've talked about the problem of disruptive innovation. We've explored some strategies for managing it, and we've even connected it to our own personal lives. But before we wrap up, I want to make sure we connect all of this back to the listener. Yes, that's important. Why should someone listening to this deep dive care about the innovator's dilemma, even if they aren't a CEO or in a tech-heavy field?
Well, I think one of the key takeaways is that this book is about more than just business. It's about understanding how change works, how innovation happens, and how to avoid getting trapped in our own success.
Right.
These are insights that can be applied to any field,
Yeah.
any career, any aspect of life where we're facing disruption or trying to create something new.
I completely agree. The Innovator's Dilemma is a timeless classic because it challenges our conventional wisdom about good management. It encourages us to question our assumptions, to be aware of our blind spots, and to be more proactive in seeking out those disruptive opportunities that might be lurking just outside our field of vision.
And it does all this in a way that's incredibly engaging and thought-provoking. The book is filled with real-world examples, anecdotes and stories that make these abstract concepts come to life.
You know, one of my favorite passages in the book is when Christensen talks about how the best companies often fail because they are so good at doing what they've always done. They become so attuned to their existing customers, their existing processes, their existing value network, that they lose the ability to see beyond those boundaries. It's a powerful reminder that success can sometimes be a trap.
Yes, and another memorable passage is where he talks about how even when a senior manager decides to pursue a disruptive technology, the people in the organization are likely to ignore it if it doesn't fit their model of what it takes to succeed. It's not enough to have a vision at the top. You need to create a culture that embraces change and empowers people to challenge the status quo.
What's fascinating about Christensen's writing is that it's both insightful and actionable. He doesn't just diagnose the problem, he offers concrete solutions and strategies that companies and individuals can use to navigate disruptive change. He gives us a framework for understanding how disruption works and a toolkit for responding to it effectively.
So whether you're an executive leading a Fortune 500 company, an entrepreneur launching a new venture, or just someone trying to make a career change, The Innovator's Dilemma offers valuable insights and practical guidance. It's a book that can truly change the way you think about innovation, competition, and the nature of change itself.
One of the final thoughts that Christensen leaves us with is that disruptive innovation is not just about technology. It's about finding new markets, new customers, new ways of creating value. It's about being willing to step outside of our comfort zone and explore those uncharted territories where the future might be waiting.
And that's a powerful message for all of us.
Yeah.
Because in a world that's changing faster than ever before, the ability to adapt, to innovate, and to embrace disruption is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity.
So as you go on with your day, your week, your career, keep asking yourself, what are the disruptive innovations that might be lurking just outside my field of vision? What are the opportunities that I'm missing because I'm too focused on what's always been done? How can I be a disruptor, not just in my industry, but in my own life?
And that's a great place to end this deep dive. We've explored the core concepts of the Innovator's Dilemma. We've examined real-world examples, and we've connected these insights back to the listener's own experiences. So we've explored the dilemma, and we've looked at how some companies succeed while others fail. But I'm left wondering, what happens to the customers when an industry gets disrupted?
That's an interesting question, and one that Christensen touches on in the book. He argues that disruptive innovations often benefit customers in the long run, even if it doesn't seem like it at first.
How so? I mean, if a company I rely on goes under, that doesn't feel like a benefit to me.
Think about it this way. Disruptive innovations often offer customers a better value proposition. They might be simpler, cheaper, more convenient, or even just different in a way that meets emerging needs.
Okay, I'm following. So like when online retailers started taking off,
Yeah.
they offered a wider selection, lower prices, and the convenience of shopping from home.
Right.
Even though that disrupted traditional brick and mortar stores,
Yeah.
it ultimately benefited customers.
Exactly. And even though some customers might have been loyal to those traditional stores, in the long run, they likely found that the benefits of online shopping outweighed the drawbacks.
It's like those old-time general stores that had everything under one roof. But their prices weren't always the best, and their selection was limited.
Right.
People might have missed the personal touch, but ultimately they embraced the supermarkets with their lower prices and wider variety.
That's a great analogy. And remember, disruptive innovations often create entirely new markets that didn't exist before. So customers are not just getting a better version of something they already had, they're getting access to something completely new and valuable.
So like when smartphones came along,
Yeah.
they weren't just better phones, they were also mini computers, cameras,
Right.
GPS devices, and so much more.
Yeah.
They created a whole new category of devices that gave customers capabilities they never even dreamed of before.
Exactly. And those capabilities ultimately benefited customers in countless ways, from increased productivity to enhanced communication to new forms of entertainment.
Okay, this is making me feel more optimistic about disruption. It's not just about winners and losers. It's about evolution. It's about creating new possibilities and delivering more value to customers over time.
That's a great way to think about it. Disruption is a natural part of progress. It's how we innovate, how we grow, how we create a better future.
So instead of fearing disruption, maybe we should embrace it. See it as an opportunity to learn to adapt, to create something new and exciting.
I think that's the key message that Christensen wants us to take away from The Innovator's Dilemma. It's not a book about doom and gloom. It's a book about empowerment. It's about understanding the forces of change and harnessing them to create a better future for ourselves, our companies, and our society.
And I think one of the most empowering messages in the book is that we don't have to wait for someone else to disrupt us. We can be the disruptors.
That's right.
We can be the ones who challenge the status quo, who create new markets, who deliver new value to customers.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for anyone. Regardless of their industry or their role, we all have the potential to be disruptors in our own way.
So whether you're an entrepreneur launching a new venture, a manager leading a team, or just someone looking to make a difference in the world, The Innovator's Dilemma offers valuable insights and practical guidance.
It's a book that can help you understand the dynamics of change, identify opportunities for innovation, and develop the strategies and the mindset to thrive in a world of constant disruption.
And on that inspiring note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into The Innovator's Dilemma. It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners have found it as enlightening and thought-provoking as we have.
I agree. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this adventure. Remember, the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create.
Yeah.
So go out there and disrupt something.